Is your EdTech product in one of these categories? If so, the government consistently SBIR funds tech in your space, and there's every indication that they'll continue. On the other hand, if your tech isn't on this list, the government might publish a relevant SBIR topic, but there's no easy way to predict if and when that'll happen. Of course, these are really big categories. So we've collected the last 5 years of EdTech SBIRs and STTR awards for you so you can see for yourself. More on that later. But assuming your future funding looks frothy, or you want to be ready if a promising grant does come out, here's what you need to know to have the best chances of winning. First, these grants are competitive, and the best proposers lay out how their solutions address the stated goals and that funder's larger mission. So to have the best chances of winning, you need to know what your biggest funders care about. And good news, 80% of all EdTech funding comes from just 1, 2, 3 federal agencies. And the biggest department funding education tech is exactly who you'd expect. That's right, the Department of Defense. And this shouldn't be a surprise. The DoD trains hundreds of thousands of new recruits every year, so they do a lot of educating. And it isn't all guns and radios training. The DoD does everything. So they train people in everything, so they want EdTech in everything, from communications to mechanical repair to doctors to linguists. So no matter what kind of EdTech you're interested in, there's a very good chance the DoD is interested too. All right. Here's a clue about the second biggest funder. This is the percentage of GDP spent on healthcare, and as usual, we're number 1. So with all that spending, it's not surprising that the Department of Health and Human Services is our second biggest funder. And number 3 is the NSF. And even though the NSF is a lot smaller than the other two, they are very interesting for 3 reasons. First, the NSF loves wild technologies. So if you have a crazy idea that could dramatically improve educational outcomes and that's backed up by PhD level science, the NSF may be for you. Second, the NSF tends to fund smaller and newer companies. So if it's just you and a co-founder, or you just incorporated, or your product is just a concept paper, the NSF is more likely than others to fund you. And third, the NSF's grant topics tend to be really broad. So no matter what kind of EdTech you're interested in, the NSF is at least open to hearing your idea. So the NSF is great, but it has some big challenges, and we're working on an NSF-specific video that we'll post here. And in case you were wondering, the actual Department of Education is number 4. So bottom line, the person funding your EdTech is more likely to look like this than this. Also, to make this a little more real, later in this video we'll be talking to an EdTech founder that SBIR funded their product. Next, let's make sure these grants are big enough to be worth your time, because a good proposal takes about 100 hours, so it's an investment. The average EdTech Phase 1 grant is about $170,000, and the average Phase 2 is about $1.2 million, with some variation depending on who funds you. Next, do SBIRs move fast enough to meet your needs? Well, if you're serious about starting a business and building a product, and you have a solid business and funding plan, then yes, EdTech SBIRs do move fast enough. I've been incubating startups for a decade, and I've been a VC for the last 3 years, and I've learned something surprising. There is never a bad time for a startup to get a few $100,000. Hard to believe, I know. So if you're committed to building a business over years, and you apply for an SBIR here, it doesn't matter that much whether you get the money in 6 weeks or 6 months. It'll be a good day whenever it arrives. On the other hand, if you just don't like your job and you've got an idea for a product but you don't really know where to start or how to fund it, and you're hoping that a federal grant will solve all your problems, then the SBIR program isn't fast enough. Or even worse, if you already quit your job to chase your startup dreams and you're running out of money, then an SBIR definitely won't move fast enough. But here's the typical funding timeline, and I'd like to point out this area in red. This is the period when SBIR Phase 1 dollars have generally been used up and Phase 2 dollars haven't arrived. So if you're planning to grant fund your company, you need a plan to cover this gap. Next, I said writing a proposal is a significant time investment. So what are your chances of winning? Well, the traditional wisdom is that you have a 15% chance of winning a Phase 1, and if you win a Phase 1, you've got about a 50% chance of winning a Phase 2. But if you want a more personalized perspective on your chances of winning, here are some trends we found among EdTech winners. First, different agencies tend to fund companies at different sizes and maturities. For example, the average DoD SBIR recipient had about 60 employees, while at NSF the average winner had 4 employees. And if we cut that data by SBIR versus STTR, you'll notice that smaller businesses are doing slightly better with STTRs. So if you're small, maybe prioritize NSF, DOE, and HHS. And now I'd like to introduce Jason Starkey with foreign language training startup Jedburgh. So Jason, thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about what your product does?
Yeah, the product is designed for military linguists. We have over 100,000 military linguists in the government, and they need to be fluent in a foreign language, and that's a very hard thing to do. And so what we've done is built a software solution that is tailored to them, help them learn a language and retain it over the duration of their tenure as a linguist.
Can you set the stage of where you were when you applied for your first SBIR?
When we applied for our first SBIR, we were coming off of a big contract that we were awarded from a Special Operations Command client. And we wanted to improve the product. And we realized that the product that we had built initially wasn't very good. And we needed to completely reapproach how we would design the product. And so we partnered with AFWorks. We finally listened to a lot of people who were giving us advice and said, apply to AFWorks, try to get an SBIR. We were awarded that SBIR, and through that, that was the beginning of a long process, multi-year process of being acquainted with and reaching out with other government stakeholders and Air Force, in particular, about how we can iterate upon the product. So it was less of a funding opportunity and more of a networking and opportunity to be introduced to other stakeholders that were very interested in this space. That's, I think, the hidden benefit of the SBIR is it's not just a vehicle for funding, but it's a vehicle for access and a contract that gives you access to other stakeholders and people that need your solution.
Do you have any reflections on, like, tactically how collaborating with the government has accelerated the development of your product?
Yeah, I mean, tremendously. Collaboration with a government partner, with an SBIR funded project is a great way to move forward, because it's you both recognizing, you and the government partner both coming together and recognizing that, hey, we don't know what this thing's going to turn into yet. I'm funding an SBIR project. This isn't some traditional project that I can just buy out of GSA. This is a commitment with both the government partner and the vendor to work together toward this solution that is really unknown at this point. And so it's the intangible aspect of that SBIR that lets everyone know, hey, this is a partnership that is going to be progressive and iterate moving forward. And so it really sets the stage for that, a new type of way of working with the government partner. And then they're able to, like, open their doors. And it's great because, like, our main client, knowing that it was an SBIR, I said, hey, I got to know who I'm building for. And so they invited me over to where they work, to their offices at Defense Language Institute. I got to sit in on the classrooms. I got to do all the design thinking tactics that you have to do. And they were very willing to open their doors and let me see and communicate with all the stakeholders. And so that intangible aspect of just being an SBIR fund or R&D project really does do a lot of benefit in terms of making sure that you build and iterate on the right solution.
So a couple years ago, you got an SBIR, and today you're a going, fully fledged Edtech company. Any thoughts on where you are today, and how that SBIR has led to this?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. Okay, so first of all, we've only gotten a phase one SBIR, which I think was like $35,000, which was nice. I'm not going to complain, but we've never gotten a phase two. We never enjoyed the benefits. We've applied to many and have always been unsuccessful with that. And so we've never had that big pile of money that other people have benefited from, which is definitely, has some cons with it. You want that money that you can spend, but I can definitely guarantee you this. Had we been given that $1 million, $2 million early on when we first applied for it, we would have spent all of that money on work and product that was the wrong working product. We've really been a bootstrap firm, and I can speak right now that kind of doing that bootstrap effort, grants are great, the SBIRs are great, but it does instill this discipline to focus and be very efficient with your time. And customers have just kind of funded it along the way with phase threes. So in that regard, I can't speak too highly on the benefits of having these large grant awards.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just say, working in EdTech, you work with a lot of academic institutions, and there's a lot of people, research academics, that have a very established way of doing business and working. And so what you're trying to do to them is empower them with information to make them make better pedagogical interventions, better manual interventions, and you're trying to also encourage better data infrastructure for automated interventions. And so it can be very disruptive to the status quo, which is why working closely with the academics, with the instructors, we have great relationships with our instructors, is so critical, because they're just a key stakeholder, and try to, instead of thinking of replacing them, think about how you can kind of amplify their instruction capabilities and their pedagogical interventions with information, with data.
I'd also like to say thank you to this video's sponsors, J2 Ventures and FedScout. If your EdTech is a good candidate for federal funding or sales, and you're interested in an equity raise from the market's leading dual-use VC, check out J2. And if you're looking for help finding, evaluating, and responding to SBIRs and other government contracts, check out FedScout. Now, let's get to the spreadsheet I mentioned. Link in the description below. And in this spreadsheet, we've collected all the EdTech, SBIR, and STTR awards we could find for the last 5 years. And here's what I suggest you do. First, find the tab related to your tech. So if you do skills training, open the skills training tab and look for awards that are similar to your tech. And when you find them, look at the agency and sub-agency, because if an agency was interested in your kind of tech a few years ago, they still may be interested today. And you might want to learn more about their educational mission and goals. Next, look for keywords in the title and abstract and write them down, because you're going to want to create a saved search using those keywords. And to learn how to do that, check out the video on the left. And we're on track to hit 42 SBIR and startup grant videos in 2024. So if you want to catch them all, click the subscribe icon on the right.